Bandidos, what up? Your boy Tux here, and today we're ranking all 58 Division 2 exotics, from total trash to absolute legends. If you're tired of grinding for gear that's just gonna collect dust, this video's for you. I've been there, wasting time and resources on total crap. That's why I created a tier list, slick radar charts, and hard data to show you what's worth your time and what's actually worth your expertise investment. Stick with me and I'll show you which exotics are worth grinding for and which ones you can ditch. Let's do this.
Wait, did we just become best friends? So nice to meet you. I think you're cool.
Piece of shit wristwatch.
We have a ton to get through, but before we jump in, here's how I rank these exotics. I coded a custom form to capture data and chart out what's actually worth your expertise. It uses 3 simple metrics: build synergy, output impact, and consistency. Disclaimer, this is only general PvE. So if it has a PvP application, I'm gonna leave that out. That's just a whole nother ball game. And this comes up often, so let me be clear. Rare niche plays for raids is not going to be part of the consideration. Each exotic got a score from 1 to 10 on these, and I sorted them into 5 tiers. The lowest tier is Poopy, and then we got Good, Great, and God tier. The radar charts, they're visuals that show each exotic's strengths and weaknesses in a snap. A bigger, more balanced radar chart usually means a stronger exotic, but the tiers aren't just a simple average of those scores. Beyond the numbers, I also factor in real-world context, like how an exotic performs in clutch moments or feels in practice, which the charts don't fully show. So while the charts give you the raw data, my tier rankings blend that with experience and judgment. Data is the foundation, but the tiers add a layer of insight tailored to what works in the field. There's one thing that's going to come up, and I have to say this now. Just because something is in the Poopy tier or the med tier, it doesn't mean players don't use it. If a weapon is just way too niche, it's going to be at the bottom of the tiers. Your own play style might shift the value of an exotic too. And that's all part of the game. Not everyone's gonna vibe with my picks, and that's fine. These rankings lean on metrics to keep bias low, but if you disagree, no need to hate. Let's hash it out in the comments. Let's kick off with the Poopy tier. The exotics that just don't cut it. Weak scores, clunky mechanics, or way too niche. Okay, first let's start with the Mosquito. This pistol is supposed to pull aggro. Stacks are shared between players. At 5 stacks, the enemy will forcefully target the last player to apply a stack for 5 seconds and take 25% more damage to armor. And unfortunately, the aggro goes to the last person that shot the target. Because of the lack of control and the limit of scenarios where it's actually useful, this thing sucks. Next up, let's talk about the Sacrum Imperium, shown in purple here, making it balanced and crap in all metrics. This sniper was DOA. It scored 1 in every category. Talent's useless. Damage is a joke. It looks cool though. Next up is the Overlord Exotic Shotgun, indicated by green. This is the KSG shotgun, which is strong. The talent is called Capitulate, and this is why it sucks. Hitting an enemy applies negative 4% movement speed for each pellet hit for 5 seconds. There's just no PvE content that makes this shotgun worth running. All right, next up is the Vindicator, and it is represented by the pink triangle. The Vindicator is an exotic rifle, urban MDR. The weapon amplifies damage by 60% weapon damage to highlighted body sections. The talent's damage is good. The weapon is weak. It's on the low end. But the worst part about it is you have to go in scope to get that buff. That buff is randomized, meaning it's only good if you like to shoot feet. Next one on the Poopy list is the Diamondback Exotic. This is represented by the large purple triangle. This thing is strong. It is the exotic 1886. The talent is called Agonizing Bite. Basically, you get amplified damage and 100% crit chance. The problem is that the weapon chooses a target, even those that are not in line of sight. It's completely unreliable. Next up are the Acosta's knee pads. Probably never heard of these. These are represented by the large green triangle in the center. These give you additional movement speed, but the conditions to get that movement speed are a pain in the ass. Next up is the Imperial Dynasty, represented by the small yellow triangle in the center. This received a very low score. Let's read the talent. Dragon's Glare. While in combat, applies burn to the enemy closest to you within 20 meters. The cooldown's 35 seconds. Any exotic or weapon that selects the target at random is easily deemed useless because the target it catches on fire might not be the most critical target, even though the target's the one closest to you. Next up are the Rugged Gauntlets, represented by the tall blue triangle right in the center. These all red gloves with crits have the talent called Iron Grip, where you get less recoil when hip firing or or when you're blind firing from cover. We'd rather run something else. The provocateur chest piece is represented by the large red triangle in the bottom left corner. You'll receive 25% damage resistance from enemies within 20 meters. That does include elites and non-elites. This is a very important talent slot, and 25% damage resistance is not as effective alone as you would think. And if you want to be tanky, there's usually something better for this slot. Next up, Meh tier. Not absolutely terrible, but not amazing either. Think niche or underpowered, and severely need a tweak. First up is the tardigrade armor system, with limited usefulness to group gameplay, limiting its versatility, and one of the reasons why it's down here at meh. So whenever you or an ally's armor breaks, they gain 60% of your armor as bonus armor for 10 seconds. Cooldown per ally is 45 seconds. You most often see this in raids, since the bonus armor only kicks in when your armor breaks and only lasts for 10 seconds. All it's doing is buying you time to run away or apply an armor kit, which sure is helpful, but the bonus armor from something like Point Man would be way better. All right, Ridgeway's pride is represented by the tall blue triangle. The talent's called Bleeding Edge. Shooting enemies within 15 meters applies bleed to the target, and you get some strong repairs from 3 to 48% of your armor per second for every enemy that is bleeding within 15 meters. Bleeding Edge has a contradiction built into it. If you eliminate the target that you have bleeding, you're essentially taking away your heals. But if you ran it on a tank build, that can be pretty strong armor regen. Problem is, the setup is all red, making it more suitable for a DPS oriented build. Because these builds don't have a ton of armor, the armor regen that this gives you usually can't outpace the incoming damage. There's just better sources for heals, and for the chest, it's such an important place for a damage talent, you're better off just going that way. Next up is the collector chest, and it's represented by the medium-sized gold triangle in the center. This is an all red chest piece that has a talent called Hoarder, so you're going to get +3 grenade capacity and +50% grenade radius, more damage, more grenade damage for each extra enemy caught in the blast. Automatically regenerates a grenade every 30 seconds if you have less than 2 grenades in your inventory. And it's that last part that puts it in the mess section. You do find yourself actually running out of grenades, and this became even less attractive once they nerfed the lefty or sledgehammer talent. The Acosta's Go Bag is represented by the green triangle, and poor Acosta's Go Bag, I feel like it never gets a chance. The talent is called One in a Hand. Throwing a grenade refunds it and grants 1 skill tier for 15 seconds. Grants overcharge if already at skill tier 6. Then you get a bunch of other stuff like 2 in the bag, an extra armor kit, 3 extra grenades, 25% more ammo, repair skills, status effects. I mean, this thing has a lot. The thing is, for skill builds, the talents that we have available are just so much better and more consistent in damage than overcharge once every 60 seconds. Next up, we have the Bloody Knuckles, represented by the purple triangle. Adorned with crits, they come with the talent called Over the Top. Seen red grants 25% weapon damage and 100% to melee damage. This lasts 20 seconds and has a 60-second cooldown after completion. Now, this has really good damage. The problem is the activation. Either you have to hit these guys with a grenade, and grenades in this game sucks, or you have to melee them, and melee sucks too. Often when you melee the enemy, they melee you back, and their melee hits a lot harder than yours does, enough to break your shield or bring you down entirely. And to eliminate the cooldown, you technically have to hit them twice. By the time you inserted said melees, you could have just taken out the guy with your primary weapon. Slow and clunky. So we're kind of getting stacked up here, but the Ninja Bike knee pads are indicated by this magenta triangle that I'm toggling here. They come with the talent called Parkour. Performing a cover-to-cover or vaulting reloads your drawn weapon and grants 25% bonus armor for 5 seconds. That is the ultimate fantasy in the Division 2, but there's just so much time to reload in between engagements, and the worst part is that you're not able to use Parkour when you would need auto reload the most, like when you're getting surrounded by 3, 4, 5 enemies. However, Parkour does have some niche plays with weapons that you don't want to reload in order to preserve some sort of buff. The Bullet King is that giant green triangle on the left. A beautiful exotic. It comes with bullet hell. This weapon never needs to be reloaded. For every 100 bullets that hit an enemy, replenish some ammo to you and your allies' reserves. Now that sounds nice. The problem is the weapon isn't super strong. On top of that, there's no content where you actually need that much sustained DPS. Anything over 200 or 250 rounds is really unnecessary. LMGs. All right, the Doctor Home is indicated by the long purple triangle on the left. This is based on the M18 CQB rifle, which is pretty darn strong and fast. Shooting an enemy with the weapon will apply a mark for 5 seconds. If that marked target is killed, it will give a 10% armor repair kit, which applies to the whole party. So this is really good for team, not so good for solo. The worst part about it is that it's got a tiny mag and it forces you in scope. I think that the mark window of 5 seconds is too short. Good tiers where it gets solid. These exotics won't carry you, but they're dependable. Let's start with the Ninja Bike Messenger backpack, and it brings amazing utility. It's got 3 cores, which is super helpful, and a talent called Resourceful. Slots in with any equipped gear set and or brand set to fulfill a requirement towards unlocking a gear set bonus. The downside is that this usually means a weaker build in 99% of the cases. However, if your build is already strong and you're looking to open up some utility, say adding more hazard protection or weapon handling, then this is a great fit. Next, we have Birdie's Quick Fix, which is represented by the blue triangle. Birdie's is a healer's backpack. You can get this by playing the climax mission on Roosevelt Island. The talent's called Combat Medic. You get 80% revive speed. There's a whole bunch of small perks in here too. The downside is you get no buff to your revive hive. Only 4 revives when your agent isn't completely flatlined or completely down. So team support builds that would run the Combat Medic, like Future Initiative, for example, is ideal for the most difficult content, like Legendary. The problem is, Legendary enemies execute your agents before you even get a chance to pick them up manually, even if they're standing right next to you. So in order to make this better, they need to at least make it so that the revives with the hive are just as fast as the manual hive when your agent's not completely down. When you are able to pick them up, it is like you have the hand of God. Next up, we have the BTSU Data Gloves, represented by the large golden triangle on the right hand side. These are great mostly for team support builds, especially for healers. The talent's called Transference. So basically, once every 120 seconds, you can activate an overcharge that will also work for your allies if you're at tier 6. You can reset the revive hives, which it's most famous for. Otherwise, the downside is that it's really a niche play for healer builds. Now we have the Dodge City Gunslinger's holster, represented by the elongated green triangle on the right hand side. In order to get this, you have to make sure you buy the blueprint when you hit level 40 from Anaya. Once you purchase that blueprint, parts will drop from bosses at control points in the open world. Once you get all your parts, you can craft it. The talent's called Quick Draw, and this works for your pistol. Once it's at full stacks, you pull this out and you can one tap almost anything. The downside? Well, don't miss. Besides that, the other downside is that it doesn't really work for full-time pistol builds. So now we have the Waveform exotic, which is represented by the purple triangle that is right there in the middle. So generate a stack of 3% skill damage on one of your skills every second, capping at 10 stacks. Then it's going to transfer those stacks to the other skill, kind of one tick at a time. So it's sort of a teeter-totter damage effect on this 30% damage. So the major downside, for example, when your turret's up and your drone has been destroyed, those stacks will leave your turret and go onto your drone, which is not deployed. And it's also not great for consumables. Next, we have the Shocker Punch, which is represented by the magenta triangle in the center right. Allows you to shock enemies with a melee. It even has the ability to shock all enemies within a 5-meter radius. The downside is that you have to have all 3 things equipped in order for this to work. So you need to have this holster, the St. Elmo's, the shield, and that's for the full effect. Next up, we got the infamous Sawyer's knee pads, represented by the smaller green triangle that is leaning towards the right. They got health, and that really sucks. They do have this talent called Stand Your Ground, which prevents you from being staggered by explosions. And boy, is that helpful. Most popular on sniper builds, but you might also see them on an LMG build like the Pestilence, because they give you really good damage if you can stay still. That's also the downside. Next up is the Bighorn Exotic Assault Rifle that is represented by the medium-sized purple triangle that leans towards the right. I'm probably going to get yelled at for putting the Bighorn in the good category and not the God tier category, because there are a lot of fans of the Bighorn. So based on the AUG, there are 2 talents. One of them gives you 450% headshot damage. When in scope, you're better off with a sniper. It's the second part of the talent that we're here to talk about. That's 150% headshot damage. The downside is you need headshots to get your stacks, you need headshots to use your stacks, and you need headshots to maintain your stacks. And that 42 round mag is extremely small for that. And PC players definitely have an advantage. And for those that have mastered this, would probably rate it on a higher tier. Next, we have the Strega exotic assault rifle that's represented by the pink tall triangle in the center. The Strega is built on the FAL, and it also has a small mag, which is a big bummer. It's also kind of slow. The talent's called Unnerve, so killing an enemy will apply a mark on every enemy within 20 meters, which is a big range. Multiple marks can be applied to the same enemy. Max number of marks that can be applied to an enemy is 5. You're going to deal 50% amplified damage per mark to marked enemies. The consistency is all over the place. More importantly, you're going to be pretty weak on that first target, which kind of sucks, especially when you're pressed. Your allies could be outperforming you, making it difficult for you to get marks. Next up, we have the Eagle Bearer, which is represented by the teal triangle that's towards the center right. Everybody wants the Eagle Bearer, and it is a very beautiful exotic. So you can get this from the Dark Hours raid, as well as the very rare drop from the Dark Zone. Recently, there's been a special event at the end of every season that also gives you a very rare chance of getting this. The talent is called Eagle Strike, so the accuracy increases as you continuously fire up to 30%. Now, many would argue that accuracy isn't as much of a problem as the stability on this thing. So you end up having to put on weapon handling anyways. The real thing is tenacity. Headshot kills grant the tenacity buff for 15 seconds, which is a decent amount of time until you hear the rest. 40 to 80% of damage taken is delayed until the buff expires. All of the total delayed damage is reduced for each enemy killed while the buff is active, up to 100% with 3 kills. So if you go berserk and you took a bunch of damage during your immunity phase and then you didn't meet all of the requirements, this weapon essentially kills you. Always a crappy thing. The other nice thing is it has 60 rounds in the mag. This is the Pecan, one of the newest exotics we've gotten in the game. It's based off of the RPK, and it's actually very strong. In fact, the RPK is the strongest LMG in the game from a base damage perspective. So each kill with this weapon gains a stack, pushing your mag up to 180 rounds. Huge. But it also requires on kill, so some players might have difficulty running this in a team scenario. You might be forced to reload early, which is going to break the consistency of what the talent is supposed to be giving you. None of this makes it a bad exotic. It's actually a really good exotic. Borderline great. Now we're at the Merciless, or the Ruthless, for those that have that one. Same weapon, different name. And this is the green triangle. It's one of the faster rifles in the game. The binary trigger is where it's all at. So this weapon fires on trigger, pull, and release. It's not fully automatic like the other rifles. At 7 stacks, shooting an enemy deals 500% amp damage and creates a 7-meter explosion, dealing 500% weapon damage, consuming the stacks. That means on the 14th hit, you're gonna get that boost to your damage. What about the other 13 shots? The worst part of the weapon is that you can't really select who to apply that big boom damage to. It might kick in on a red normie dude that is about to die from a fart in the wind. Instead, he takes this big giant damage that you built stacks up to get. The other downside is the weapon handling. However, this weapon has been improving over time because of all of the ways we can get improved weapon handling. Next up, we got the Ravenous, which is the big orange triangle. On trigger pull, fire both barrels at once. Hits add offensive primers and defensive primers, so you have to toggle shoulders to get the most out of this. When detonated, each offensive primer deals 100% weapon damage, while each defensive primer grants 4% bonus armor and 10% amplified damage to armor plates for 5 seconds. Armor plates are a special type of armor that's not on all armored targets. So you're talking like Chungas and Warhounds, and then the primer effectiveness is doubled at 10 stacks. This one's always controversial because people that do raids a lot tend to want to rate this weapon higher. And the benefits are cool, and I do say it is better than before thanks to that automatic trigger. Let's talk about the downsides. First, it doesn't have a scope, and that kind of sucks because it's a rifle. So it's very limited to playing in the enemy's face, yet it lacks the oomph to be confident at that range. More importantly, the switching shoulders mechanic doesn't work in a lot of cover, like shooting around corners, or even working at certain camera angles, like shooting over your back left shoulder when you're leaning against a car. And if you're using a controller, punching in to switch shoulders over and over just feels clunky, which might have PC players ranking this a little bit higher. Next, we have the Sweet Dreams, or the Lullaby. It's the same weapon, just different name. It's represented by the big, tall, black triangle. As you can see, it was rated 10 for build synergy because you could basically run it on any build. at least as a backup weapon. This is based on the Spaz shotgun. It gives you the talent Sandman, so melee attacks instantly kill non-elite enemies, even in Legendary. Somebody you just need to get out of the way. That being said, it's difficult for it to make itself out of the backup weapon category. Now we're looking at the Dread Edict, which is an exotic SVD in the sniper category. Full stop. Shooting enemies builds stacks to a cap of 20. Headshots grants 2 stacks. Each stack grants 2% weapon damage and 5% headshot damage. On reload, clear all stacks and gain 5% of your max armor as temporary armor for 10 seconds for each stack removed. Headshot kills with Dread Edict restore all bullets in the magazine. This is actually really powerful because one of the big problems with using an SVD is you end up with ammo issues. The downside is that Determined exists. The backfire is the red triangle based off of the MPX and a very unique talent called Payment in Kind that did recently get a buff. So dealing damage to enemies adds a stack of 2% crit hit damage up to 100 stacks. Yup. That's 200% critical hit damage, lasting for 10 seconds. On reload, apply a 10-second bleed to yourself, there's the catch, which deals 0.5% of armor damage per stack, which can kill you, especially when you're taking damage during a reload. What might be confusing is this weapon is currently shining in Year 7 Season 1 because of the modifiers. It gives you almost all of the critical hit damage that you need. The weapon does lack a little bit of luster with its 850 RPM, making it mid there, so you need to spice it up with the right gear set. Some people see running hazard protection as a downside, but it's actually pretty cool to be immune to not only bleed, but all the status effects in the game if you build it right. That's where the weapon really gets interesting. The other downside is the whole lasting 10 seconds thing. It doesn't degrade. You literally lose all 100 stacks if you hit that 10-second timer. So you find yourself mentally occupied on ensuring you're maintaining your critical hit damage stacks, which is kind of annoying. Next up, we have the Chatterbox, represented by the purple triangle. The Chatterbox is an OG exotic, and you can get it from basically a parts quest by opening hyena lockboxes into 3 zones on the right upper side of the map. It gives you insane RPM, so when you reload, rate of fire is increased by 25% for each enemy, max stack is 5, and kills refill 50% of your magazines. In many cases, you can have infinite ammo on a crazy fast RPM. When you're not stacked, the weapon does feel quite underwhelming. The Oxpecker exotic SMG is one of the newer ones and is represented by the dark teal triangle that is center left. 950 RPM, 50 in a mag, and the talent is called Symbiosis. So while having a shield deployed, lose shield health at a rate of 10% per second. Your shield receives repairs at 25% of the damage dealt by this weapon. The stronger you are, the more this is going to work. Not super hot on tanky builds. It's got a big downside, and it literally can destroy your shield, which in turn will destroy you at the wrong time. You're out of cover without a lot of defense, relying on your shield. You can be disrupted or staggered. This weapon won't help you in those cases. You're about to go into a reload, but somebody hits you or an explosive hits you, and that stagger keeps you from a reload, and just in that tiny window where you're not applying damage, your shield will break, and so will you. Now the Lady Death exotic SMG is represented by the tall yellow triangle that leans slightly to the right. So it comes with a talent called Breathe Free, and when moving, you're gonna gain 4 stacks per second or 8 if sprinting. Each of those stacks is worth 75% amplified damage. That's a lot of damage. And when you get a kill, 20% movement speed for 10 seconds. Downside is that in PvE content, especially the more difficult stuff, just think about open world, heroic, where you got a bunch of elites out there. You know, you get pinned down from time to time. In those situations, you have no damage coming out of this weapon because you're not running and building stacks. Next up, we have the Busy Little Bee exotic pistol that is represented by the elongated red triangle that goes out to the right. Each shot to a different target will give 1 stack, up to 10. Each stack will give 20% weapon damage increase. Stacks will activate once the agent switches weapons. 10 seconds is enough time to make good use out of that 20% weapon damage. Even if it's just you and a boss, 1 shot from your pistol to get 20% weapon damage increase is a lot. But where it lacks is the consistency in build synergy, because to get more than that requires a bunch of enemies around, and that's not always the case. But the biggest downside is there are a lot of talents in this game that you'll lose the buff from the weapon if you rotate out of it. Think of something like Killer. That keeps you from integrating this weapon regularly. Great tiers where the fun starts. These exotics slap hard and shine bright. First up is the Vial Mask. Toxic Delivery status effects also apply a damage over time debuff for 10 seconds. Total damage dealt is equal to 50% of your concussion grenade and increased by your status effect attributes. This excels exceptionally high on CC or crowd control builds for an additional damage over time. It even allows something like an Eclipse Riot Foam build to actually apply damage. So the way Toxic Delivery works is also its downside. The build synergy is really low because if you're not rolling a shit ton of status effects on your build, then the Vial just doesn't really pack enough punch to say it's worth it. Next up is the Coyote Mask, represented by the tall blue circle. Really good for team builds and can be run solo, especially on SMGs. So you and all allies gain a bonus based on the distance of the last enemy you hit. So 0 to 15 meters is the biggest buff at 25% critical hit damage. The first one is really easy to manage because if you're playing aggressive, you can keep those enemies within 15 meters. But if you're sitting back as a sniper trying to keep everybody beyond 25 meters, since you're still and the enemies aren't, that's a variable. So that's the downside, and it's not a very big one. Now we have the Catalyst Mask, which is represented by the gold triangle slinging over to the right. Now, disclosure, this ranking is theoretical because currently the Catalyst is bugged. It's been bugged since arrival. So I'm evaluating this based on what it says, not how it performs in practice. Dealing and receiving status effects, burn, bleed, shock, EMP, disrupt, all of them. Build stacks of catalyst to a maximum of 12. Each stack grants 2% weapon damage, 2% status effects. That's 24% weapon damage, 24% status effects. Each enemy within 25 meters that is affected by a status effect grants plus 1% stack per second. Being affected by status effects grants plus 2 stacks per second. And then there's a decay of 1 stack per second if there's no enemies in radius or affected by status effects. So reactant is the final part. So at max stacks, killing a status affected enemy grants bonuses for 5 seconds, which isn't super long. 25% bonus armor and 20% reload speed. But on a really strong chain killing DPS build, that could be handy. There's the final part, stabilizer. While burning, you can maintain ADS without disruption. So the downside is the condition. There must always be a status effect in play with this mask. Next up is the Catharsis Mask, represented by the tall green triangle that leans slightly to the right. Anything with the shield really shines with this. So taking damage builds stacks to a cap of 30. Taking damage at max stacks triggers a purge, removing all stacks and status effects, and then dropping a healing cloud, which restores 5% of max armor for 10 seconds. This helps all of your allies in the cloud too. The downside is if you're running this on a high DPS build or a high red build, you or your shield aren't strong enough to take the amount of damage required to purge this often, and run and gun builds are always on the go and they tend to miss out on that purge when it happens. But if you're running some armor and a shield, this is a darn good mask. Next up is the Nimble Holster, represented by the deep purple triangle that pushes a little bit towards the right. So receive repairs of 5% of your total armor for every 1 meter run in cover to cover. Damage taken while doing a cover to cover is healed over 10 seconds. You can get massive heals. The downside, of course, is consistency because it requires cover to cover movement and ideal for shieldless builds. Next up, we are looking at the Centurion Scabbard Holster, relatively new. 20% rate of fire and 20% weapon damage on one hand, and then when you swap, 50% magazine size and 50% reload speed to the weapon you just swapped to. So there is a duration limit, but there's no refresh limit. And the magazine size, don't sleep on that. That can turn some average weapons into some really great ones. The downside is that some talents just don't pair up with this. Like if you're running Killer, if Killer's active and you swap, you're gonna lose Killer's buff. Next, we have the Blue Screen Exotic LMG, represented by the green triangle. Just by shooting, you're gonna build stacks. The idea is to get up to 50 stacks. So at 10 stacks, you're gonna get a pulse. On marked targets for 5 seconds, 11 to 25, you get Pulse and Disrupt. 26 to 49, you get Pulse, Disrupt, Disorient. And then at 50 stacks, you're gonna get all of those. In addition, all hostiles within 10 meters of a marked target will get those buffs for 5 seconds. This effect will trigger immediately if any marked enemy is killed. The build diversity on this thing is crazy. You can run it on so many builds. The crowd control that this brings is absolutely amazing. The downside is that to get the most out of it, you want to synergize this with the skill that you are using often. Next up, we have the Iron Lung Exotic LMG, represented by the purple triangle. Shooting heats up the weapon, filling up a heat meter. The meter is equivalent to 50% of the weapon's standard magazine size. When the meter is full, rounds ignite enemies. When not shooting, the meter depletes over time. reloading or swapping the weapon fully depletes the meter. So it's got a pretty decent RPM, but the mag is kind of small, and that's mostly the downside. But what's really cool about this is it opens up all sorts of possibilities. First, it's triggering a status effect, making gear sets like Ongoing Directive really easy to run with this LMG. Also, the status effect is a form of crowd control. You could spread the love or focus fire, and catching guys on fire pops them out of cover and stops them from shooting at you. Next is the Pestilence LMG, represented by the wide, lighter red triangle towards the bottom. Plague of the Outcast, and it was recently buffed. It's got a very nice RPM and on the smaller side for mags. Hits apply a debuff, dealing 100% weapon damage over 10 seconds. This stacks up to 50 times, so that's your goal, get 50 stacks. Whenever an enemy dies with this debuff, 100% of those stacks are transferred to a nearby enemy within 25 meters. So eventually everybody is infected by this plague, and it can also kill those pesky dudes that never come out of cover. The downside is it's very limited to high damage builds, specifically the more red cores the build has. Now the Mantis exotic sniper. It's got the talent called In Plain Sight. Your scoped view displays additional information about enemies not targeting you. It shows weak points and where their head is. Helpful at night, by the way. Headshot and weak point damage against enemies not targeting you amplified by 50%. Headshot kills reset the cooldown of the decoy skill. This is actually one of the best weapons in the game, not just one of the best snipers in the game. The decoy is an amazing skill, and unlimited decoys, wow, you, if you're playing solo, or your team will love you for that. There's not many downsides to this weapon, except, well, determined exists. Next up is the Nemesis, and I gotta say both the Mantis and the Nemesis are borderline god tier. This is a railgun. Basically, you gotta hold to get the full damage of the weapon. Anything less isn't really effective unless you already have headhunter stacks. In that case, you can partial charge. But this is the strongest one-shot weapon in the game. But if you're well rehearsed, then using this as a primary weapon, there is nothing that stands in your way and opens up amazing build synergy. Next up is the Ouroboros exotic SMG. That's represented by the lime green. This isn't really about the talent, to tell you the truth. The downside is the talent, and I think we'd want more out of our talents for an exotic. But the RPM is really good, and so is the reload. So it's got great burst and sustained damage. However, the recent nerf has taken it from what I would say god tier down to great tier. It used to have a larger mag, and boy, was that meaningful. Next up is the Liberty, represented by the short and stubby red triangle that leans hard to the right. The Liberty is only good for bulwark tank builds. That's why it's got a low build synergy, but when it comes to those builds, it's basically best in slot. It's great at what it does. Hits grant 2% weapon damage, stacks up to 30 times. Headshots consume all stacks, repairing your shield for 3% per stack. That's some serious heals, and if you're using a tank build in Legendary, you need it. Now it's god tier time, and these exotics, they rule the game. Let's start by talking about the Memento. Comes with 3 cores. The kill confirmed. You get 30% weapon damage when you have 30 stacks. For every red core on your build, you can get a bonus of 5% more weapon damage for 10 seconds, and that can stack. And then you get 10% bonus armor for every blue core you have on your build, and that gets crazy big. Plus 3% armor regen when you're at full stacks, and then you get 5% skill efficiency per skill tier, and 30% skill efficiency when you're at full stacks. It's not the highest in damage, however, the enemy can't take it away unless they flatline you. For solo gameplay, it's really hard to deny this. In my opinion, it's the best bonus armor around, and there's very few things in this game that give you skill efficiency. This is one of them. The downside is that in some hands, this won't be as effective in team play because it requires you to be competitive and get your kills. However, in the right hands, that's not a problem. Next, we have the Exodus exotic gloves, represented by the gold triangle. And boy, this thing has saved my life over and over and over again. On armor break, drops a smoke bomb at your feet, concealing you from enemies for 3 seconds. Cooldown is 40 seconds. The smoke bomb gives you time to get in cover or run away, and in that time you're considered out of combat, and so it will heal up your armor. Now the downside is how much it heals seems to be a variable. Sometimes it get healed all the way and sometimes it's halfway. This is basically like the unbreakable chest talent, but on your gloves. The Chameleon exotic assault rifle really coming out to play over the last couple of seasons since they buffed it. This is represented by the green triangle. This will probably be a little bit of a controversial one. Those that are using it know it belongs here. It's a high 900 RPM, a 50 round mag. Here's the clutch part. This thing comes with all of the crit chance that your build needs. So 15% crit chance there, and Adaptive Instincts is going to fill in the rest. Hitting 30 headshots grants 20% critical hit chance and 50% critical hit damage for 45 seconds. 65 body shots, down from I think 75, grants 90% weapon damage for 45 seconds. That's serious damage and really easy to earn. Now, the downside is the range. With that kind of RPM and buff, this is intended to be an aggressive playstyle weapon. Next up, we have the Capacitor Exotic Assault Rifle, indicated by the purple triangle. It's the only assault rifle with 12% damage to armor. So shooting enemies builds stacks to a cap of 40. Each stack grants 1.5% skill damage. On top of that, you get 7.5% weapon damage for every skill tier you have on your build. And it's got really good mods. 10% crit chance, 30% crit damage. When it comes to exotics, nothing competes to this for skill damage builds. Next up is the St. Elmo's assault rifle, represented by the tall magenta triangle. 70 rounds in a mag, 850 RPMs. It handles like a dream. One of the best assault rifles all time. It's got 15% crit hit damage, 10% weapon handling, and 15% crit hit chance. Shooting an enemy with this weapon will give 1 stack. At 100 stacks, the next magazine will be 100% filled with shock ammo, and shock ammo is extremely awesome. So that, plus the large mag and the handling and its DPS, just make it all a very balanced weapon. The downside is that, well, they did add diminishing returns on status effects, so that amount of shock ammo can be wasted easily. Also, enemies are so bullet sponge, you find yourself putting all 70 rounds of your shock ammo into a single target. That sucks, but it's still one of the best. The Scorpio Exotic Shotgun, represented by the larger green triangle on the outside rim. So this thing's got a really high base damage just to get you started. Decent sized mag, short reload, and then the talent is Septic Shock. So it's gonna apply a status effect, considered a debuff, so it's its own thing. So this is especially good on builds that don't have any damage but need to contribute, something like a healer build. You're buffing your team. And if you're a new player, this is a nice crutch to lean on as you're getting better at the game. It can keep them from shooting back at you. For build synergy, because it's applying the status effect, you can do pretty cool things, like even add the Vial Mask. But hard to find something really wrong with it. Next up is the Regulus Exotic Revolver, which is represented by the shorter purple triangle. The Regulus is the strongest handgun in the game. Headshot kills create a 5-meter explosion, dealing 400% weapon damage and applying bleed to all enemies. It's like having an artillery turret in your hand. You can only get this from the Iron Horse raid, so that's the downside. And finally, with perfect 10s, this is the brand new, not yet released Tinkerer Exotic Mask. So yeah, disclosure, this is more speculation than anything, but it's shaping up to be the real deal. So the talent's called Abridged, and if your primary and secondary weapons are not exotic or named and of the same type, so both assault rifles for example, the secondary weapons talent will also be applied to the primary weapon. Doesn't apply to talents that include weapon swapping, and doesn't apply if the primary and secondary weapon have the same talent, so you can't double up. Think of the possibilities of that. Just running through my mind, there are so many builds where I can't imagine another exotic would replace such damage and utility that can be put on a weapon at the same time. Think of a sniper with Determined and Preservation. Think of an assault rifle with Killer and Optimist. Or what about Killer and Strained? So many options, and that might make this exotic mask, wow, best in slot on a lot of builds, and has me wondering, will this break the game? I have to ask, will we even be using any other exotic? That's the rundown. 58 exotics, Poopy to God tier. Whether you're optimizing or just curious, this list has your back. Disagree with anything? Drop your hot takes below. I want to hear. And boy, oh boy, if you made it this far, you have to hit that like button. Maybe subscribe. Catch you next time.
Thank you for hanging out with me. I'm Tuxedo Bandido, and if you found this video helpful, be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on the good stuff I have coming for you. And if you like content like this, be sure to check out the video I have recommended for you right here. If you have anything you would like me to cover, be sure to let me know in the comments below. And thank you to all the channel members and donors who make things possible. Tux Nation wouldn't be the same without you.
When you buy a game from Ubisoft, enter the creator code Tuxedo Bandido to support the channel. Easy peasy.
Wait, did we just become best friends?